If you're one of the 5 subscribers of my channel, you're probably thinking these are not catfish reels. I got into crappie fishing last year and found that all my reels are too big and too heavy and too clumsy for jigging. And so I went looking for something light and smooth. The problem is that I also wanted something with a very low gear ratio. I have a thing about low gear ratio. Whatever reel I decide to buy, I always buy the lowest gear ratio available. And so I narrowed it down to these 2 guys, but unfortunately they were only sold in Japan, because here in US we never get any of the good stuff. Fortunately, both of these are available on eBay, so I just got them shipped from Japan. So let's start talking about the reels, because my reviews are way too long and I'm trying to improve that. This one you've seen everywhere. This may be the most popular Finesse spinning reel in this $200 price range. And the fence of this reel, I mean, it is very hard to find anybody put any criticism on this reel. It's almost like a cult. And there is like 100 reviews on YouTube. But if you consider buying this reel, watch this review to the end, because I found some, let's call them areas of improvement for this reel that I didn't see mentioned in any other review. Now, on the YouTube reviews, the Stradic is usually compared against the Daiwa ballistic, which is a little bit cheaper, and usually the prevailing opinion is that the Shimano Stradic is a little bit better. I owned the previous Stradic, the FK, and I owned the previous ballistic, the EX. And in my opinion, the Stradic was far superior to the ballistic EX. And so big was the gap that I eventually got irritated with the ballistic and I sold it. So this time around, I just couldn't find courage to buy the new ballistic LT. And anyway, the word on the street is that even with all the improvements of the ballistic, the Shimano Stradic is still a little bit better feeling reel. So in my opinion, what I have today, this Daiwa Theory, is a much better match for the Shimano Stradic than the ballistic that everyone is compared against. So hopefully you find this interesting. And if by any odd circumstance you are interested in this reel, the Daiwa Theory 2506, well, you have no choice but to watch this review, because I couldn't find any information about this reel on YouTube or on a website that I can read. So let's see how it compares against this guy. Starting with the frames, both reels, or both companies, use their high-tech materials. Shimano uses the CI4 material, Daiwa uses the Zion. They're both excellent materials with great reputation, very high rigidity, virtually no flex in the body, and at the same time very lightweight. In my opinion, there is no advantage to either reel in terms of the frame, and it's kind of a tie when it comes to the frame. One thing you'll notice when you look at the frames is that Shimano ditched the reverse switch on the Stradic. The Daiwa still has it. I personally prefer a reel without a reverse switch. I never use those, and to me it's just one more thing to break and one more entry point for water and salt and dirt to get in the reel. I can't remember when was the last time I used a reverse switch on the reel. Probably when I was in Bulgaria, and on those reels we have over there is virtually no drag. So if you wanna let go some line, going back is the only way. But yeah, on anything made in the last 15 years in the Western world, I don't think reverse switch is necessary. Now let's compare the handles and the handle knobs. The handles look identical to me. One piece aluminum handle, kind of elegant. I can't tell the difference between them, to be honest. The difference is in the knobs, and they have a rather different approach here. Shimano has the same T-shaped design that they use in the previous Stradic and also in so many of their other reels, while Daiwa went with this minimalistic slim profile design. And because I use these reels for only small fish, I find that this minimalistic low profile knob fits me, and it fits me much better, and I just find it much more enjoyable for some reason. So this is not something important, but to me, kind of a personal preference. I prefer this slim knob better than the big T-shaped knob of the Shimano. There's something more important to show about the handles though. If you look at the Shimano handle, I don't know if you can see this, but there is a small amount of free play. Overall, this is a super solid reel, and this amount of free play is probably better than any other reel up to this price point. But on the Daiwa theory, there is virtually, maybe there is none at all. I cannot feel any free play in the handle at all. And I think this is the first reel I have, the first spinning reel. My Daiwa Ryogas, the baitcasters, they don't have any free play in the handle, but I think this is the first spinning reel that I own that doesn't have a free play in the handle. It's kind of hard to tell, to be honest, if you get any advantage from this. I can't, when I reel the two reels, tell that, oh, there is a free play here. But I always check for this, and even though you can't feel it when you use it, this kind of is important for me. I kind of enjoy little things like this. So props to Daiwa for making a handle with virtually zero free play. Now let's talk about the spool capacities. Before I show you the actual numbers, which spool do you think has larger line capacity and by how much? I think it's immediately obvious that this is a low profile spool, this is a rather deep spool, and the line capacity on this reel will be more than twice what is on the Daiwa. So on the Shimano you get 210 meters of 0.25 millimeter mono. On the Daiwa you get only 100 meters instead of 210, and only 0.20 millimeter instead of 0.25. So more than twice the capacity. So yeah, Shimano has more than twice the capacity of the Daiwa. To me, this is advantage and a disadvantage. If you're gonna use that much line, then it's obviously an advantage. But if you fish in my own circumstances, which I never cast more than, I don't know, 30 feet from the bank, then finding so much line to fill the spool can be a hassle, and it also costs money. And also when you put so much line, the reel gets heavier. People don't think about that, but the line has weight as well. So for this particular application, you know, jigging for trout and crappie close to the bank, I actually prefer low profile spools. At the end of the season, you can just get rid of all of the line and put fresh line for the next season, and it's very cheap to replace. So yeah, it can be advantage or disadvantage depending on the application. Now talking about spools, there is a big difference what's inside of them. First of all, I never mentioned, but the Shimano that I bought is actually 3000 and the Daiwa is 2500. So the Daiwa is half a size smaller, and yet it is the reel with the larger spool. Regardless of that, let me show you the drag properties of the two reels. Shimano Stradic CI4, 9 kg, 20 pounds. Daiwa Theory, Japanese, drag, 3 kg. So we have 9 kg of drag, 3 kg of drag. So obviously, again, if you need a lot of drag, big heavy advantage to the Shimano. You know, who applies 20 pounds of drag when they fight a fish? I mean, this is just asking for losing a trophy fish. And I have much bigger spinning reels. I've caught 40-pound carp. I never put more than 5 or, I don't know, I can't tell, but maybe 5-7 pounds of pressure on the fish. I don't want to risk losing a trophy fish. To me, this kind of magnitude of these numbers of the drag on the new reels, 20 pound, 30 pound, 40 pound. This is more for marketing than actual benefit. And I'm talking about this tiny little finesse reel. If you're saltwater and you're fishing on top of some wrecks and you don't want the fish to get inside the wrecks, it's a totally different kind of thing. But this little reel, I mean 20 pounds, if I have only 3 kg here, I gotta tell you that I'm not gonna lose sleep over this. Both drags are perfectly smooth, by the way. I already fished the Shimano. I purchased a spare spool for the Shimano. Neither reel comes with a spare spool, but one maybe advantage for the Shimano is that the spare spool cost only 40 bucks. I tried to purchase a spare spool for the Daiwa as well, $110 for the spare spool. You can buy a very decent reel for $110, so yeah, prohibitively expensive. I don't know, maybe it's a special material. Why is it so much more expensive than the Shimano spool? If the Shimano spool has 6 drag washers for the drag, and this one has only 1 drag washer, and that's why it has only 3 kg of drag. Still costs $110. Maybe there's something about the materials. Anyway, I thought that was curious and I'd mention it. Now, while both drags are very smooth as you'd expect, they actually sound very different. I don't know if sound is important to you, but it's kind of another thing for me that I'm almost obsessed with. I like a loud, vibrant drag. The Shimano drag, listen to this. I'll try to get it real close. It's not very loud and sounds kind of dry. It's not very vibrant. The knob on top for the adjustment of the drag actually sounds louder than the drag itself. So You know, I got used to it and I kind of like it by now. It's the same on the other Shimanos, but listen to the drag of the Daiwa. It's much louder and much more vibrant. It's almost like the string of a guitar. When you pull it, it keeps vibrating a little bit. So I personally enjoy the drag sound of the Daiwa a little bit better than the Shimano, but I realize this is so unimportant and so personal that I don't know if it's worth counting as advantage, but I thought I'd mention that too, because you're not going to see this on the other reviews. Bale Arms. You can see for yourself. The Daiwa has much thicker but hollow bale arm. The Shimano has solid but very thin bale arm. The mechanisms are actually rather different as well. Listen and look at the mechanism of the bale arm of the Shimano. You have a kind of clicking or ticking noise, and it opens a lot. Look how much it opens. I know some people that cast very far these lures, they have a phobia that the bale will trip prematurely and they're gonna lose their $50 lure. If you're one of these people, you're gonna prefer this bale arm mechanism, because I feel it has bigger safety than the Daiwa. Let me show you the Daiwa as well. Very different bale arm mechanism. I personally prefer the aesthetics and the feel of the thicker hollow bale arm. But look at this. First of all, the operation is very quiet, virtually silent. And then it doesn't open as far back as the Shimano. So yeah, if you're afraid it may trip, to be honest with you, yes, it may indeed trip, but I'm not gonna cast expensive lures with this. Just little 1 gram jigs, and if you cast a lot, I kind of prefer, to be honest with you, the silent operation of the Daiwa. I never use the automatic trip on any of my spinning reels because it's really detrimental to your gears and the bale mechanism. I always manually trip them, but even then, I kind of, if you do this, I don't know, 200 times today, I find this less annoying and just more pleasant than doing this every time. So again, personal preference, and this is my personal preference. It's not really an advantage or disadvantage to one of these reels. Now the weight of these two reels is virtually identical. The Shimano weighs 190 grams and the Daiwa weighs 185 grams, so 5 grams less. But technically the weight advantage goes to the Daiwa because it already has a larger, don't worry about the sizes, 3000 versus 2500. I mean, the reel has a larger spool, so to achieve a smaller weight with a larger spool, to me, the weight advantage, although really tiny, does go to the Daiwa. And by the way, it will be more than 5 grams of weight difference when you load line on the spools, because I mean, this thing takes a lot of line to fill. It gets a lot heavier. That Daiwa will take very little line to fill to the lip of the spool. So yeah, that about the weight. Okay, let's talk gears now, because this is arguably the most important part in this reel, in any reel. With respect to just pure smoothness, I tried so much to determine which reel feels smoother to me, the Shimano or the Daiwa. They don't feel the same. They feel different, but it's kind of difficult to describe. But I couldn't tell which reel has smoother gears. To me, both reel has, almost perfectly smooth gears, and with respect to smoothness, it's a tie. Now, in terms of durability, however, in my opinion, Shimano has an edge. And I have two reasons for that. First of all, if you compare Hagane gears versus DigiGear 2, which is what we have in these two reels, and which are both excellent gears, they both claim super high precision in the cutting process, but only Shimano claims special treatment and special materials for the gears to improve durability. And Shimano also has the X-Ship technology. So for that reason, this is one of the reasons why I think the Shimano will have an edge. And the other reason is just from anecdotal evidence and from browsing on eBay and other fishing websites. I just see more old Shimanos than I see old Daiwas. And I've always thought that the Shimanos have slightly better survival rate, but that's not too scientific, and I'm just telling you my personal opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. Oh, one more thing about the gears. So both of them are perfectly smooth. Actually, in my opinion, it's a tie in terms of smoothness. I think the Shimano will, at the end of the day, outlast the Daiwa. But in terms of noise, the Shimano, while perfectly smooth, let's see if you can hear this. Has a little bit of gear noise. Again, this is, I'm being extremely picky here, but I just want to show you something that you are not going to see in the other reviews, but because everybody just says, oh, they're perfectly smooth, it's the perfect reel, go buy it. The Daiwa also has a little bit of noise, but I don't know if you can tell the difference. The Daiwa is much quieter, and the noise is less raspy. It almost sounds sophisticated kind of noise. So with respect to noise, definitely the Daiwa more quiet and kind of different, more pleasant noise of the gears. I forgot to show you the main reason I ordered this from Japan. Gear ratio 5.0 for the Stradic, 73 centimeter retrieval per crank, and look at this gear ratio on the Daiwa, only 4.8 to 1. I love this. I knew I was gonna buy this reel when I saw this gear ratio. And 72 centimeter retrieval per crank. So Daiwa has the larger spool, but because of the lower gear ratio, actually retrieves 1 centimeter per crank less than the Shimano. I should have showed you the bearings while I had the boxes in my hand. 6 + 1 bearings in the Shimano, 7 + 1 bearings in the Daiwa. I couldn't find where the extra bearing was. I tried to find, but because the manual on the theory is only in Japanese, I couldn't find where the extra bearing is, but yeah, one extra bearing in the Daiwa. Now here is what in my opinion is the biggest advantage of this Daiwa and some other Daiwas over the Stradic. Mag sealed. Now mag seal, being a liquid seal in nature, is just naturally always going to be superior to the conventional seals that Shimano uses in their Core Protect. One of the advantages of mag seal is that it doesn't wear out as a conventional rubber seal and doesn't need replacement. But the other advantage is the fact that a liquid seal will always have less resistance while spinning than a conventional rubber or silicone seal. And that's what got me addicted to all of these mag seal reels. It's the user experience of having no resistance when you spin the handle. But when you compare these two reels, there is no advantage in terms of resistance in spinning, because yes, this is super easy to spin, but for some reason so is the Stradic. Maybe even easier, maybe even a little bit easier. I mean, it's very hard to tell. They're both because the rotors on the both reels are made of expensive materials. This is a Magnum white rotor, and this is whatever the air rotor of the Daiwa. Special technology, super wide rotors, specifically designed to reduce this initial resistance when you start spinning the reel. They both feel super wide, but I expected, because it's a mag sealed reel, the Daiwa to have some advantage in terms of spinning resistance. But actually it doesn't. And if it's not a tie, I mean, I would call it a tie. They're both very, very easy to spin the handle. But if it's not a tie, maybe even the Shimano is a little bit easier to spin. But I thought that was interesting because, just judging by the specs, you would expect the Daiwa to be easier to spin, but it wasn't. Maybe it has a thicker grease that they put on the gears. I don't know, but I just wanted to share this with you. Now, before I say my final thoughts on these two reels, I want to make a preemptive strike here and tell you that regardless of which of these two reels buy, it is extremely unlikely that you will be dissatisfied by one of these two reels. So when I talk about advantages, disadvantages, this is really nitpicking. These are both amazing reels. So whichever you get, you will be happy with it. So with that said, I think for my personal preference, I think I will enjoy using the Daiwa a little bit better. From purely aesthetical point of view, I don't like neither gold, no pink or red or purple or whatever that color is. But, come on, this reel it just looks better than the Stradic with the color of this spool. So purely from aesthetics kind of point of view, I like the Daiwa a little bit better. And with the more comfortable handle, the smoother, quieter Bale operation, the louder, more pleasant sounding drag, the low profile spool, I think I will enjoy using the Daiwa a little bit more. On the other hand, if you plan to use this reel for life, I'm pretty convinced that the internals of the Shimano, while they feel just as smooth and pleasant as in the Daiwa, I think the internals of the Shimano will prove more reliable in the long run. So if that's important for you, I recommend going with the Shimano. But yeah, like I said, you really, you know, I'm gonna use a cliche here. I don't like using cliches, but you really can't go wrong if you get one of these two reels.